Okay, so I want to do a sketchbook review. Um, I'm not actually finished with this book, but I feel like I'm onto something that I want to share. I've had an experience lately that I think is very probably common with a lot of artists, but I wanted to share my experience. This is sketchbook. This is my newest sketchbook. I just purchased it the 10th of March, and what is it, the 21st? So 11 days ago, and it feels like 2 or 3 months. But when I started the sketchbook, I was starting on the street doing some, sketches of statues, war heroes, etc. Girl in the park. And I did some exercises for mannequinization of, the skeleton, the body. I don't remember doing this, but in the sketchbook, something began to happen. Um, I feel like I'm finding my personal voice. I feel like I'm finally beginning to express myself in a real way, where I'm not just using methodology, where I'm not just practicing methodology. I'm trying to move past that, trying to go into a place where I'm truly creating, you know, work that is I identify with, that's identifiable to me. Um, some of this is done with Blackwing matte. You can see the way that the graphite kind of shines, and that's a little annoying. I like the pencil, but it's a little annoying. But you can see here, this is very amateurish. There's nothing definitive about this. There's nothing truly expressive about this. I was practicing the Loomis method. There's some rendering. I used smudging techniques. It's pretty, I guess. I don't know. But here, I'm on the train at this point. And one thing that this was kind of a breakthrough for me, because as you're riding on the train and things are bouncing and you're unstable and you're trying to draw, I found myself really making marks from a different place, from I don't know how to describe it, more of a primal place, not necessarily just practicing methodology, but because I had less control over my body because I was on the train, it forced me to be a little more expressive in ways that I wouldn't have normally been with the pencil, with the handling of the pencil. And everything is in the right place. It's all copacetic. The brow, it's in thirds, right? We're looking at that sort of measurement. Once that's there, you get 90% of your equation solved. So the rest of it is the features, defining the features, putting those things in. And this portrait, because I was on the train and because I was able to be more expressive, and it was no fault of my own or no, true decision of my own, it really showed me something that I wanted to explore further, but purposefully. And so as I move forward in this book, from this point on, I feel like this is where my voice is beginning to define itself. You're doing a block-in exercise here, a very sensitive portrait of Marilyn Monroe. It's pretty, but, I'm just exploring here. A movie scene from one of my favorite movies, Apocalypse Now. I don't think the likeness is there, but the composition and just kind of doing a scene type thing to stretch a little bit, to stretch myself a little bit. I want to do some more of this stuff in the future. These little vignettes from movies that I admire. Listening to music, doing, portraits of Jimi Hendrix. And here I'm still tight. I'm still not where I want to be. Everything is too controlled. Everything is too precious. I'm not really pushing myself, and I'm trying, but it's not working. I'm being too cautious, and you can see over smudging, and it's just it's amateur looking. It's not what I want out of my work. Same thing with Bob Dylan. It's amateur looking. It's not what I want out of my work. Walking along the Seine and trying to draw some architecture and just failing miserably. And it's something that I need to work on. It's something that I need to explore more as architecture and scenes, etc. Because I want to move into that direction where I'm doing more picture making, not just portraits. This is a head that was on the bridge, and just quickly drawing that and then trying to turn it into, a figure. Whatever, it doesn't work really well. But then when I got home that night, I was thinking about really exploring, opening up, trying to do something, along the style of those old school Paris posters. You can almost see, some sort of text here for whatever brothel or I don't know, show that late 1800s. But I wanted to do something along those lines, but I wanted it to be more expressive. And I have this, I'll show it to you. I've had this thing, and I haven't known what to do with it for a long time. It's water-soluble graphite. It's by Lyra, and it's a big water-soluble graphite pencil. And I don't know. I just started with this in the corner and just used this to kind of contour around where her body would be a little bit. I left some room, then came in and started to draw from the figure up to the face. I didn't want it to be about a portrait. I didn't want it to be about a face. I wanted it to be about composition and exploring texture and, just being more free. And I feel like this piece really defines what I would like to do in the future. Kind of an Eiffel Tower sort of thing in the back, kind of giving a little bit of atmosphere, but, really kind of exploring texture, form. I really like how I began to use these shadow shapes and really kind of over-define them really into these abstractions on her body that kind of come up in here, the thing even on her neck, the shadow cast on her neck. Really I kind of see this as a piece that could then be turned into a larger piece, painting, larger drawing, something on gouache. But my notebook, I want to be more like this in the future, where I'm doing these studies for more completed and finished pieces in the future. And, this in and of itself could be a finished piece, but, in my mind, what I'm doing here, how I approached it, the way that I was, I used my knowledge, but in a way that it allowed me to be more free, is something that I want to explore even further, because I feel like this was a big step for me. The very next thing that I did was a complete failure. And it's so strange because I was happy with this one, sat down to do something else, and it just totally failed. And some days are like that. You don't feel it. And I wasn't feeling it this particular time. So it happens. Doing a little bit of a block in, a little more sensitivity and, the rendering of the face. But at the same time, I feel like I'm a little more free. I'm not using the Loomis method here. I'm outside of that right now. I'm just focusing on the big, expressive, blocks of shape and really placing things in that way. I can see the proportions in my head without using the Loomis method. And once you get to that point, and it allows you to do things a little bit differently, where you're not just practicing or feeling like you're practicing methodology, but you're really trying to express yourself. And, even something like this compared to what I was doing with, like these portraits up at the front, this is Rockwell, but it's more tight. Something like this is more tight than this. There's just a slight difference, this is a study, and this is, for me, a drawing. Once again, going back to the body and really kind of trying to focus on the things that I liked in that first, figure study, where I'm using these hard edges of the shadows to kind of add a little more abstraction to the body. And her pose was already abstract, but trying to use that a little bit more. And doing something like highlighting the contours in certain areas. I think that's something that I enjoy doing and really able to express certain things in certain ways by doing that, the separation of form, the separation of background, foreground. Even though there is no background here, it still feels dimensional. It still feels less flat, even though it's drawn very flat, because I'm highlighting some of these contours using different line weight, and that's important. Something a little more rendered here. Wanted to go back and kind of do it. When you're searching for reference and you're searching for things, you click on something on Instagram and all of a sudden your feed is just totally wild. And so I was getting a lot of these, model girls popping up. And I saw this really cool one that was, she was wearing this fur stuff. And I thought that's a challenge to try to, to try to do and to try to capture. So I really was happy with my ability to capture this kind of vignette of this, model in fur, white fur here and some kind of brownish sort of fur here. But to use the pencil and use that to create those textures was a lesson and an exercise. And I think I got her pose down. The proportions are down. Face, everything is good. I'm really happy with this. And it's good to exercise like this. It's good to do things like this. And it's I think a nice drawing. I'm trying to go in and do Schwarzenegger, really high contrast photo. And I really, once again, was trying to be more free. I wasn't necessarily using the Loomis method. I might have put down some lines. I don't think I did on this one. I don't think I did put any lines down for the Loomis method, like the center of the face. There's no evidence here. And normally I don't erase. So I think I was just using, visual measurement. I was measuring things. Normally I start with this part of the eye and then move from there, but really sort of measuring things in that way so that I could then put in those large blocks of tone. And you can see here I'm using the side of my pencil in a very expressive sort of way, really trying to focus on being expressive, trying to bring in my personality to these portraits. And I think it worked well. The likeness is sort of there. I could see it, but pushing myself. And I think that's been important in this book and has really, started to gain more of that confidence in this particular sketchbook. This is something I'm not well pleased with. I think the texture in his shawl or robe or whatever this is coming across, but I'm not really happy with. I think I over smudged. Less expressive. You can see that going from the Schwarzenegger thing. Let's see here. Going from the Schwarzenegger thing to this, much less expressive. And I think I was attracted to his fur, and I was so happy with this one. I think I was trying to go back and do something like that, but I think overall it's you're going back to a little more amateur look. It doesn't look, like I did this on purpose. It looks like I was trying. And when it looks like you're trying, some of my favorite artists, when I see their work, it doesn't look like they're trying. It looks like it was just born from their hands. And that's what I want. One of those people are Sargent. John Singer Sargent, incredible draftsman, incredible with graphite. This is with the polychromos. Dark sepia is what I like the most to draw with. But I wanted to do a master study at this point because I wanted to kind of get my feet under me and see things through the eyes, try to see things through the eyes of somebody that I really admire. And John Singer Sargent is one of those artists. And of the whole thing, when it's not about copying John Singer Sargent. That's important to try to understand how he did things. But it's the fact that you're spending 30, 45 minutes actually looking closely, and it forces you to look closely at everything he did. And one of the things that expressed me the most, one of the most beautiful strokes of his charcoal on the page is this S-curve that comes from the ear to the jawline. The way that he expressed that and the way that it just finishes the face, it brings everything forward, creates dimensionality with just one S-curve, when everything else is so simple and void of so much detail and expression here. There's no way to express form here. He hasn't at all. But he's used this line, and then the rendering in the eyes, nose, and mouth to create that dimensionality and that separation from the background, because he pushes the background back with this expressive shading work around the head. And then the beauty of how he did the robe or the dress, it's just incredible. So it's important to do master studies because you're going to learn so much from doing those things. And it was this that really kind of inspired me. So it came to a point where I realized that I have not been doing expressions. Everything that I draw, almost everything that I draw, are straight faces. No expressions, no emotion. You know, in the work that I would like to do in the future, what I have in mind that I want to do, expression is important, whether it's expression in the figure, expression in, you know, the face, whatever it might be. I haven't been working on that, and I think that's been a big mistake. So I wanted to, you know, when I thought about doing expression, I need to work on this. One of my favorite movies is The Shining, and I think it's, you know, the acting is incredible, and I think it's some of the most expressive actors of that generation. You got Jack here laughing. Wanted to capture that, and really kind of gives you the ability to see how the face changes when it expresses itself. So, you know, how things stretch and move and curl and wrinkle. You know, his eyebrows lifted like that. That's something that I wanted to do. Shelley Duvall is probably one of the most expressive performances, and I think when I was a kid watching this movie, probably before I should have been watching this movie, it was her performance that scared me the most because it was so real. The way she screamed and the terror in her eyes, that made it 10 times as scary as it would have been if it would have been a different actress, I think. But this is one of my favorite scenes when he's chopping through the door, and, you know, wanted to really capture her fear in her eye and how, you know, look at that. I think I nailed it on that one. Then sat down later and totally just complete junk. I don't know. You know, the funny thing is that when I sat down, I knew I didn't want to draw. I was forcing myself to draw. I was like, not feeling it. Began, and it totally went wrong, and I kept trying to push it. And because sometimes you may start off and it's wonky, but the more you go through the ugly phase, and then you get to the point where you're happy with what you do. But this never felt that way. And I guess my advice is, when this happens, do what I did, stand up, go somewhere. I think I went to the store and had to buy a few things, and then came back later and drew this, which I'm very happy with because it's working on expression. I was able to use, you know, some of the things that I had been experimenting with, this contour type thing to define some things and use some very just simple expressive lines, you know, line work, shade work, to really try to bring out the form in this face. And this guy had a really expressive, incredible face. And so I think going from here to here in a matter of, I don't know, hour and a half, I think it taught me something that, you know, sometimes you need a break. Sometimes your brain just doesn't turn on. Maybe that changes later when I'm 5-10 years in to drawing. But it's not like that now. After I did this guy, I did Salvador Dali. Wanted to do a little more expression, and I think these two. I think this one, it really I'm trying to. I don't want to say be minimal in my lines, but I'm trying to use less rendering, like true rendering. And I think with the polychromos, I think it's almost natural for me not to render in the way that I render with graphite. And so I'm able to use those lines and just those simplicity of something like this, a contour line, these abstraction lines, this in his coat, how it just comes around. And it's not detailed, but I'm trying to use those things to express, those features and those contours and that form, and use it to encapsulate and direct the portrait in a certain way. Even in the eyebrow here, I've done some things that I'm happy with as far as being a little more expressive. So, I'm finding myself in this sketchbook. I'm finding the direction that my natural personality is starting to push me in a certain way, and I'm happy about that because I'm relying less on methodology and actually just sitting down and drawing more, like allowing myself to draw. And that's something that I'm becoming very well pleased with. It's a goat. It's a ram. So went to a castle and they had rams as lawnmowers. And this guy came up and was, I guess, people I'm sure feed him all the time. So he just stood there. But one of the cool things about drawing this is that his horns are the human body, right? The way that the form turns on itself, the way that the shadow was, the way that it's the human body. I saw a lot of similarities between drawing the human body when it's in high contrast to drawing these forms in his horns. It's the same thing. And so it allowed me to see that in that way and then be able to express it in a very quick and expressive way that I think really captured the form and the light. And so I think, I'm really looking forward to going and drawing more animals, maybe at the zoo, whatever. But I think with this, being able to just see that and see the relationship and how important it is to study human form and to study the body, it leads you to have the ability to be able to draw outside of those forms because those forms exist across nature. So I was really happy to be able to draw this and kind of surprised with myself, like, it's not my thing, animals necessarily, but now that I've seen the relationship, how stupid would it be to say it's not my thing, because it's just drawing form, it's drawing shape, it's drawing those shadow, blocking in those shadows. So that's all it is. And, learning as I'm going, learning how to draw different things, learning how to see, allows me to then express myself more fully and more broadly. Simple John Lennon. I'm not sure that it works. It's iconic, his glasses, whatever. I wanted to just do something very simple shapes. That's it. And that's the end of this sketchbook. And the reason I wanted to share it with you before I was finished, I've got about, 15 pages left. I should be able to knock those out in 2 or 3 days because I've been drawing so much. But one of the things that I wanted to share with you is kind of my progression and how I'm going from, sitting in nature, drawing like this, which is very amateur. It's an amateur drawing, to doing something more even like this, which is in nature also. But I feel like it's a professional drawing. I feel like it's something that's more expressive. Going from, something like this to something like this. I'm progressing. I'm living that moment of, rebirth, of renaissance, understanding, myself in a different way, and my relationship to my work, to methodology, how I'm going to move forward, what I'm going to do to push myself as an artist, to have a unique voice, something that can be my own. This sketchbook is and has been a big revelation for me. And I'm very happy to be here now in this point where I can intellectually see that, study it for myself, look at this work. And that's one thing I think is important when you're sketchbooking, is to go back. Don't just do it, put it away. Go back and look, see your progression, understand how things are developing for yourself. Find those things that you like about what you've done, even if you didn't do it on purpose. Like I was talking about with this portrait. It's a very important portrait to me because it wasn't on purpose that I drew this way. It was necessity because I was on a train that was bumpy and not a smooth ride. But going from this and seeing and going back and studying and saying, I like how I like it, and I can bring that into the things that I'm doing in the future, and then trying to do that on purpose, I think that's one of the quickest and best ways to allow yourself to grow and to have your own voice. So, as I move forward and finish this book, I'll share the rest of it with you when it's done. But just know that, we're in this together, and if we can grow together, and I can share some tips about growing, not just how to draw. I think there's so many tutorials about how to draw. There's no mistake that you're going to be able to learn how to draw, but can you learn how to be expressive? Can you learn how to find your voice? That's been the hardest thing for me, and I think it's one of the hardest things for all artists is finding your voice. But as we slowly creep forward to that point where we find our voice, I'm finding my voice, and I can do it together with you. I really have a good appreciation for the community I'm developing here on YouTube. So if you enjoyed this review, please give me a like, subscribe. I've been really happy that people are subscribing and hopefully learning. And onward together. Thank you for watching.